Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in this book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. We're in volume 12, chapters 51 through 64 today. So we're going to be studying those as we go through our study group today, because this particular class, it's more of a study group versus the traditional style of learning where I'm teaching and opening up to questions. Instead, what I do is I invite people in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read one of the chapters or multiple chapters as we go throughout the class. And then I share some teachings on that chapter. And then I open up to any and all questions that you guys have, whether it's in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like by putting that into the comment section. And then for those of you guys in Zoom, you can ask questions by electronically raising your hand and asking any questions or follow-up questions directly. So welcome to everyone. And I'm just going to switch over to the visual aids here. And for all of you guys in Zoom, if anybody would like to read, you're welcome to. Just raise your hand and let me know that you'd like to read. Okay, so this first chapter, 51, it's titled Household Practitioners, but there's actually multiple excerpts here that we can review. It looks like Marcy's volunteering to read. So if you'd like to go, Marcy, we're going to go one section at a time, even though this chapter has multiple sections. So I'll probably pause you at the end, like at the end of each excerpt like this.
Sounds good. Household practitioners. When one sees one's wrongdoing as a wrongdoing, make apologies for it in accordance with the teachings. An example of King Ajatasattu, who killed his own father. As I was, in that for the sake of the throne deprived my father, wrongdoing overcame me. Fortunate one, foolish, having done wrong and wicked as I was, in that I for the sake of the throne deprived my father, that good man and just king of his life. May the perfectly enlightened one accept my confession of my evil, unwholesome deed, that I may restrain myself in the future. Indeed, sir, wrongdoing overcame you when you deprived your father, that good man and just king of his life. But since you have acknowledged the wrongdoing and confessed it as is right, we will accept it, for he who acknowledges his wrongdoing as such and confesses it for betterment in the future will grow in the noble disciple.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here the Buddha is being approached by a current king who killed his father in order to take over the throne. And he's now realizing that this was an unwise decision. And he's basically sharing it with the Buddha and sharing what he actually did. And then the Buddha is saying, yes, indeed, that was an unwise decision that you made. But now that he's shared it with the Buddha, now a student sharing a unwise decision, they're able to now get help and they're able to grow. That's what the Buddha is saying here, that when one essentially talks with the teacher about the things that they're doing unwisely, they have an opportunity to grow and improve and gain wisdom so that they can overcome that challenge. One of the things that an individual needs on the path to enlightenment is an actual teacher. Only a Buddha would be able to get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. And the last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So you're going to need teachers and guides to be able to help you you. And among all the other things that a teacher is doing to help you is they're there for you to share the things that you feel like you've done that are unwise. You don't have to share every single little tiny detail, but in certain situations you would like to share things that you're challenged with and you're struggling with. And this opens you up to receiving guidance and advice to be able to help you to cultivate the wisdom that you need to overcome that for the future. Because if you didn't share any of your unwise decisions, then you're not having the opportunity to be able to cultivate wisdom so that you can overcome your challenges. So when the Buddha's talking about confession here, it's not about feeling guilty or shameful or giving you any punishments or anything like this. It's about you being objective and not allowing the ego to be in there, not allowing the personal existence view to be in there, getting that out of the way so that you can come forward and be objective with your mind and say, yeah, I've made some unwise decisions here and I need some help. And I need to be sure that even if I think I've seen the whole issue 100%, sharing it with a teacher will be able to help you to look at it from many different angles. And then you'll be able to cultivate the wisdom so you can overcome those challenges. And that's why the Buddha says by confessing it, meaning by sharing it with the teacher, it's for the betterment in the future, meaning you're cultivating wisdom so you can make wiser decisions and you will grow in this noble discipline that this training, this path to enlightenment, you will be able to now cultivate your mind. But if you were lying to yourself about what you were really involved in and the decisions that you made, you wouldn't be able to cultivate that wisdom and grow. So it's wise to have a teacher. It's wise to share things that you're challenged with, so that way it'll help you reduce your ego and work on eliminating your ego, but more importantly, cultivate your wisdom so that you can now go forward and making wiser decisions in the future, and that same situation won't need to keep reoccurring. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this. We're going to keep on going through, but towards the end, as we get through them, then I will open up for all the questions for all of these. So go ahead, Marcy.
Thank you, Teacher David. How to behave towards monks. Monks, whenever virtuous, practicing moral conduct, monastics come to a home. Am I saying that word right? Monastics?
Monastics.
Thank you. Monastics come to a home. The people there generate much merit on 5 grounds. What 5? When people see virtuous, practicing moral conduct, monastics come to their home and they arouse hearts of confidence towards them. On that occasion, that family is practicing the way conducive to heaven. I apologize.
Sorry, conducive.
When people arise, paying homage, respect, and offer a seat to virtuous, practicing moral conduct, monastics, I don't know why I can't do it, who come to their home, on that occasion, that family is practicing the way conducive to birth in high families. When people remove the stain of selfishness towards virtuous monastics who come to their home on that occasion, that family is practicing the way conducive to great influence. When according to their means, people share what they have with virtuous monastics who come to their home on that occasion, that family is practicing the way conducive to great wealth. When people question virtuous monastics who come to their home, making inquiries about the teachings and listen to the teachings, on that occasion, that family is practicing the way conducive to great wisdom. Monks, when virtuous monastics come to a home, the people there generate much merit on these 5 grounds. Teacher David, could you say that word one more time for me?
Monastics. It's monks. It's people.
Monastics.
Yeah,
monastics.
People who are living in the monastery. So it's like a derivative of monastery or monks. So you can think about monastics, like monks.
Monastics. Okay, thank you.
It is a little bit of a tongue twister. Yeah. Okay, so what this is a teaching from the Buddha explaining how to cultivate merit among all the other ways that he talks about cultivating merit, that if you, during the lifetime of the Buddha, were interested in learning from a monastic, then you would invite them into your home. And as they come into your home, they would probably live there for a week or a month or 2. And not only would they be helping you and teaching you, but the whole village, maybe at nighttime when it's getting cool, the whole village would come together and then they could learn the teachings of the Buddha. So the Buddha is sharing with you here that you can cultivate this merit or this wholesome Gama based in generosity. Because when you're practicing generosity, it's helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, training the mind to let go. This is helping you to get closer and closer to enlightenment. And when you're practicing generosity with anybody, it's helping you to improve the condition of your mind and helping you get closer to enlightenment. So you're going to need to practice generosity frequently. But when you're practicing generosity towards the continued sharing of the teachings of the Buddha, this is referred to as merit. It's a unique type of generosity and a unique type of wholesome Gama. And here, if someone has invited a teacher or a monastic into their home and they've done so with this confidence, the Buddha is saying, okay, this is the way conducive to heaven. But of course, the goal isn't to be reborn in heaven. This is the Buddha just explaining the natural law of Gama, of cause and effect, or action and result, just explaining what truly is transpiring rather than telling you that, hey, this would be a good idea for you to, get to heaven. He's just helping you to understand the cause and effect, that when you have confidence in the teachings and you invite people into your home in order to share the teachings, that it's going to help you. If you fall short of enlightenment, you'll be reborn into the heavenly realm. Because the same things that lead to enlightenment are the same things that lead to rebirth in the heavenly realm. So you need to cultivate confidence in the teachings of the Buddha by eliminating any doubt. And you do that through investigating and examining the teachings. That's what's going to lead to you then being able to reflect, to independently verify and practice the teachings. And as you do, that's where you start having more and more confidence, because you see the teachings are 100% true and you see that they're working to improve the condition of the mind and condition of the life. But if you fall short of enlightenment, then this is where one could potentially be reborn in heaven. But that's not a permanent existence, and you're not interested in staying in that existence or even necessarily being reborn there. You'd like to get to enlightenment in this life. Then the Buddha is saying, okay, when you pay respect and kind of offer a seat, then this is what would be conducive to being reborn in high families. And what he means by this is affluent families, families that have significant resources. Because if you're born into a family that's affluent, then your ability to get to enlightenment is actually improved, because you don't have to worry about your basic resources like food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. You could actually spend time to learn and practice and grow and develop in the path to enlightenment. Whereas if you're born into poverty, you're just busy providing for your basic necessities. You wouldn't have time to sit around and listen to the teaching. So if you're listening to this right now, you have a certain amount of wholesome Gama that you are able to spend time to just listen, and you have your basic needs taken care of, and you have an electronic device that you've had to pay for in order to access these teachings. There's plenty of people in the world that don't even have the resources to purchase an electronic device to be able to get access to the teachings. And they might be so tired from working to be able to acquire their basic necessities, they don't even have the ability to learn. So this is the unfortunate aspect of being reborn into a poverty situation. So being reborn in a affluent family would be an improvement in your existence in the human realm. But ultimately, you're not interested in being reborn anywhere at all. Then the Buddha talks about here practicing generosity and eliminating the stain of selfishness. This leads to great influence, where you'll be able to influence and people in your community. Because if you're practicing generosity, people are going to receive that generosity, and they're going to be influenced by the things that you might say or do or otherwise be involved in. Then number 4 here, the Buddha is talking about how you can acquire this great wealth also through practicing this generosity in terms of inviting monastics into your home. This is the way that leads to great wealth. And then this last one is conducive to great wisdom, that you ask questions to teachers and you listen and try to understand the actual teachings. Now, these ones that the Buddha is talking about with wealth and great influence and reborn in high families and being reborn in the heavenly being, while the Buddha is showing you the cause and effect here, he's not necessarily telling you to go out and do these things. He's just helping you to understand the natural law of Gama. What you would really like to be working towards is this development of wisdom. That's what's going to improve everything in your life, the condition of your mind and the condition of your life as well. Then we've got this next one here. This is actually just the opposite of the one that we just read. I'll just kind of summarize this one, that the Buddha is talking about a household practitioner who is lacking of confidence, who is lacking moral conduct, who has a superstition and belief in auspicious signs and not understanding the natural law of Gama, an individual who seeks a person worthy of offerings outside of his community, and a person who does meritorious deeds outside of his community, he's saying, okay, this is an outcast of a practitioner, household practitioner. Essentially what he's saying is someone who's not really dedicated and determined and diligent in developing their mind based on the teachings of the Buddha. So this is kind of almost opposite of the one that we were just looking at. And then the Buddha talks here about a brilliant of a household practitioner. And this, of course, is one who is endowed with confidence, one who is practicing moral conduct, one who is not superstitious and does not believe in auspicious signs, but understands the natural law of karma, one who does not seek outside of his community for persons worthy of offerings, and he does meritorious deeds, or this person, this household practitioner, does meritorious deeds in his actual community. So these are kind of opposites of each other. So we can move on to this one, Marcy, if you'd like to read it.
Benefits of the act of giving. But here, students, some men or women gives food, drink, clothing, carriage, garland, scents, ointments, beds, dwelling, and lamps to the ascetics or Brahmins. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is wealthy. This is the way, students, that leads to wealth, namely, one gives food, drink, clothing, carriages, garlands, scents, ointments, beds, dwellings, and lamps to ascetics or Brahmins.
So again, the Buddha is here describing this natural law of karma, of cause and effect, that when you practice generosity, and he's naming certain things that you would potentially practice generosity with during his lifetime, that this leads to this rebirth in the heavenly realm, or if one comes back to the human realm, they're reborn into wealth. And the reason why is because by practicing generosity, you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment within your own mind. It's helping you to rise to a higher and higher consciousness. So the ultimate goal is not rebirth into the heavenly world, or to come back into the human world, or to become wealthy in that next rebirth. You would like to get to enlightenment now, and it's practicing generosity that's going to help you do that. But as I mentioned, the same things that lead to enlightenment are the same things that lead to rebirth in an improved destination. So that's what he's talking about here. Okay, so now if you'd like to read this one, Marcy.
Sure. When unwholesome monks are strong, wholesome monks are weak. Monks, when robbers are strong, kings are weak. At that time, the king is not at ease. When re-entering his capital, or when going out, or when touring the outlying provinces, at that time, Brahmins and householders too are not at ease. When re-entering their own towns and village, or when going out, or when attending to work outside. So too, when unwholesome monks are strong, wholesome monks are weak. At that time, the wholesome monks sit silently in their midst of their community, and they resort to the outlying provinces. This is for the harm of many people, for the unhappiness of many people, for the ruin, harm, and suffering of many people, of heavenly beings and human beings. Monks, when kings are strong, robbers are weak. At that time, the king is at ease when re-entering his capital, and when going out, and when touring the outlying provinces. At that time, Brahmins and householders too are at ease when re-entering their own towns and villages, and when going out, and when attending to work outside. So too, when wholesome monks are strong, unwholesome monks are weak. At that time, the unwholesome monks sit silently in the midst of the community, or they depart for other regions. This is for the welfare of many people, for the peacefulness of many people, for the good, the welfare, and the peacefulness of many people, of heavenly beings and human beings.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, the Buddha is drawing this analogy that people would understand, which is when robbers are strong, when criminals are strong in a particular community, the kings are weak, or we might say the government is weak, right? And the Buddha is saying, okay, when this is occurring, even the king is fearful in entering his capital, just like Brahmins and householders. They're fearful in going out and entering into where they live. And so too, when unwholesome monks are strong, because if you can imagine during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were thousands and thousands of monks. When these monks are all gathered, not all of them are practicing the teachings very closely. Someone might think, like, if you're a monk with the Buddha, you must be practicing the teachings closely, but that would be permanent, right? So there's some people, the core group of people who are practicing very closely, but then there's people on the fringes who aren't. And if there's a lot of people who are unwholesome in the community, then the Buddha is saying, okay, the wholesome monks are weak because they sit silently and they don't actually share the teachings and help develop the community into being very strong with their moral conduct. And because of that, this is for the unhappiness of many people, the ruin, the harm, the suffering of humans and heavenly beings, because the teachings aren't coming into the world in a way that will support people in getting to enlightenment. And then the Buddha draws the opposite analogy of that when kings are strong, the robbers are weak, or the criminals are weak. People feel comfortable to come home and come into their villages. And the same thing is true that when members of the community are wholesome and practicing good, wholesome moral conduct, then the unwholesome students or monks are weak, because now the unwholesome monks are sitting silently. They're not speaking up and displaying their behavior, and then everybody kind of conforming to this unwise and unwholesome behavior. But instead, by the wholesome monks being strong in terms of practicing the teachings very closely, and there's many of them, then this is for the welfare of many people, because now the teachings can come into the world and people can not only hear them through the spoken words, but they can see people practicing them. This is one of the best ways to learn, is being in a community of people where the teachings are being practiced very closely. You can observe other people's practice and absorb some of those qualities and kind of learn, like, oh, I really like how that person practices generosity, or, oh, wow, that person is very loving and kind or compassionate, or you can observe some of the qualities of people's right speech or right action, and you can absorb this and kind of learn from it, not just from the teacher's spoken words or books or videos, but being amongst individuals going out in day-to-day life. You can see how people interact in a polite, kind, friendly, respectful way through the Eightfold Path, and then you might decide to adopt some of those same things as well. So here, let's see. Let me see what this one's all about. There's quite a few of them here, Marcy. It's quite long. I don't know that we're going to have time to go through all of them. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'll just pause there. The rest of them, if you guys would like to read these, the Buddha's going to be talking about ways to eliminate unwholesome people, meaning from a community. He's giving guidance to a king of how to function in a way that will allow unwholesome people to kind of go away and not ruin the community. And then he talks about these particular monks here, kind of what leads to wholesome results. And that's pretty much the entire thing. And then, of course, under here, I'm describing each one of these. So I'm giving a lot of words here to be able to describe these. You can read these. But let me pause and see if you guys have any questions before we move on to the next chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So let's move on to chapter 52. If you guys are reading this either before or after class, you'll get a lot of benefit out of this. All right, so it looks like Tonka has her hand up and Marcy has her hand up. Go ahead, Tonka. Oh, do you guys have questions? I'm sorry. Marcy, did you have a question? Is that why your hand was up? Yeah? Okay, go ahead, ma'am. Sorry, Tonka.
So you said that there was the one that we were skipping is a way to get rid of unwholesome. Is there a way for you to elaborate a little bit of how the Buddha would guide someone to help remove unwholesome people from a group of people that are willing to practice the Buddha's teachings?
Yeah, so what this is the Buddha giving guidance to like a leader of a community, like a king, and saying, okay, when your town is overrun by thieves and they're damaging the city, the reason why is because you haven't practiced enough generosity. So he guides the king in how to practice generosity towards the people that are doing wholesome things. So like if people are farmers and they're growing crops and they're making wise decisions about cultivating their land and paying taxes and all these things, the Buddha is suggesting that this king rewards them through generosity, like giving them land and money and things like this. And that's how to encourage people to do good things. Essentially, what he's teaching you is to accentuate the positive. And he's talking about this to a king who's running a large population, but you can do this even within your own household. That if you go around, like say you have kids or grandkids, or even like just a life partner or coworkers, if you were always telling everybody all the unwise things they were doing and pointing out all these things, it would sound pretty degrading and pretty diminishing. If 99% of the time it's always all the negative things. But the way to incentivize people to do wise things is you point out all the positive things. So when I first started training my son, of course, he didn't know these teachings very well at all. So he was doing a lot of unwise things and making a lot of unwise decisions. But even still, when he was doing that, for every 10 decisions he was making unwisely, he was making one wise decision. So I would point out that wise decision and talk about it and help accentuate the positive. And naturally, there were certain unwise decisions that he was making that just kind of naturally fell away, because he chose, based on hearing this positive feedback, of how to now conduct wise decisions and make wiser decisions that lead to more wholesome outcomes. So that's what he's encouraging the king to do here, is to accentuate the positive, is what I refer to it as. Okay, so Tonka, did you have a question, or you were interested in reading that next chapter?
Oh, I just wanted to read.
Okay, sure. We'll move on to that chapter. It looks like Marcy got her answer that she needed. So here we go, chapter 52.
Mutual support between monks, Brahmins, and householders. Monks, Brahmins, and householders are very helpful to you. They provide you with the requisites of robes, alms food, lodging, and medicines in time of sickness. And you monks are very helpful to Brahmins and householders, as you teach them the teachings that are good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, with the correct meaning and wording, and you proclaim the spiritual life in its fulfillment and complete purity. Thus, monks, this spiritual life is lived with mutual support for the purpose of crossing the flood and making a complete end of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, Tonka. So here the Buddha is describing this mutual support that he created during his lifetime in order to ensure the teachings continue in the world. That it's ordained practitioners and teachers who are sharing the teachings out of generosity and loving kindness and compassion for their students, and helping them in their life through guiding them in the teachings. And then that's helping to improve the life of the students. Their mind and their life and the way they make decisions will be gradually improving. Then the students might decide to support the teacher so that they can continue to share their teachings through any kind of offerings. During the lifetime of the Buddha, you can see some of the offerings that they made, because he didn't have them accepting currency like gold or silver, because they lived right alongside of their students and they didn't need those kinds of things. But nowadays we accept certain tangible offerings in terms of food, clothing, shelter, medical care, but also financial support as well. And this is the mutual support that the Buddha created, because if you can imagine him teaching a bunch of people to get to enlightenment, and they just stayed continuing in their careers and harvesting food and making their own food and doing their own things, they might not have had necessarily any incentive to share the teachings that would help the whole entire world to improve the condition of their mind and get to enlightenment. So by building in this mutual support, it was ensuring that the people who were learning the most deeply had the ability to learn, because they weren't working anymore. They were just focused 100% on learning and practicing the teachings. But then in getting to enlightenment more and more, because they have more time in their life to do so, they could then share those teachings with others, because they're not harvesting their own food, so they would need to share the teachings in order to be supported, that they wouldn't be able to survive without that. And if somebody was into unwholesome things and doing unwholesome things as a ordained practitioner, then they wouldn't get the support that they needed, and they would end up falling away perhaps, and they wouldn't necessarily have the ability to sustain their ability to be ordained. So this is the natural law of Gama at play, that why teachers sharing teachings, it helps the students experiencing more and more improvement in their life. They might decide to help the teachings come into the world more and more readily, and this ensures the continuation of the teachings. While at the same time, the students are practicing generosity to eliminate craving, desire, attachment from their mind and get closer and closer to enlightenment. And so are the teachers or the ordained practitioners. They're practicing generosity too, to be able to share the teachings with others. And this also makes the teachings available to everybody. Whereas if there was a price or a fee for the teachings, it would only be accessible to people who could afford that. But by not having any price or any expectation of any kind of donations, not only does it keep everybody's minds content and peaceful because there's no expectations, but it helps the teachings be accessible to anybody and everybody, no matter what your financial means might be. So let me know what questions you guys have on this one. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom if you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So we'll move on to the next chapter. Let's see here, chapter 53. And if nobody volunteers, I can read this one. Okay, Marcy's got her physical hand up. Go ahead, ma'am.
The unattainable, monks. There are these 5 situations that are unattainable by an Aztec or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara, or Brahma, God, or by anyone in the world. What 5? May what is subject to old age not grow old. This is a situation that is unattainable by Aztecs or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara, or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. May what is subject to illness not fall ill. This is a situation that is unattainable by Aztecs or Brahmins or a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or anyone in the world. May what is subject to death not die. This is a situation that is unattainable by Aztecs or Brahmins, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world. May what is subject to destruction not be destroyed. This is a situation that is unattainable by an Aztec or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or anyone in the world. May what is subject to loss not be lost. This is a situation that is unattainable by an Aztec or a Brahmin, by a heavenly being, Mara or Brahma, or by anyone in the world.
Okay.
Monks.
You can stop there. It goes on for quite a while, but this is the core of the discourse. So the Buddha is talking about 5 unobtainable things here that nobody can obtain, whether it's an ascetic, which is a monastic, or a Brahmin, which is a Hindu priest, a heavenly being, Mara, which is like Satan or the devil. This is the formless being who's interested in causing calamity in the world. Brahma, which is the way they refer to God, or anybody. So no matter how enlightened you are, no matter how advantage you are, the Buddha is saying you can't experience these things where you don't grow old, you don't fall subject to illness, you don't die, you don't have things that are destroyed, and you don't experience loss. Is there anybody that can venture to think about why this is the case? Why is it that you can't obtain these things? You guys have enough wisdom that you should be able to figure this out. Anybody would like to offer a suggestion? No one? Tonka? Okay, go ahead, Tonka.
It's all conditioned, so whatever is conditioned arises, lasts for a while, and then disappears.
Exactly. Because of the universal truth of impermanence.
Impermanence.
It's not.
One thing I was wondering, Teacher David, is when we are talking about illness and Mara, like all the beings that are formless, like I just don't comprehend. How do they get ill? Like something that doesn't have a form? It's hard for me to understand how would that being get ill and die.
Yeah, they have a certain lifespan for sure, that they're not permanent. And whether they have some type of illness, I can't really comment on that because I don't have real direct memories. I have some memories of the hell realm and the heavenly realm and afflicted spirit realm, but I don't have a whole lot of memories from those existences. Just I understand the qualities of those existences and what you experience in those realms, but I don't remember being in those realms myself. So I can't really comment on that. Unfortunately, I don't know. But what you were saying was accurate. Because of the universal truth of impermanence, because these are all conditioned objects, they're going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away. So that's why it's not possible for anybody, no matter how enlightened you are or what type of being you are, you're going to experience these 5 things. And that's what the Buddha is helping you to understand. And this is helpful for you because even when you're enlightened and you lose something or something that you have gets destroyed, you understand that this is because of the universal truth of impermanence. By the time you're enlightened, you're not going to be shaken up by those things. Now, if a tree fell on your house, you might be upset or frustrated. But if you've trained your mind to not have craving, desire, attachment, you would understand that, this is impermanence, this is destruction. So the Buddha, remember, is explaining to you how the world is. He's not explaining to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the cause and effect. He's explaining the natural laws. And this is one of those natural laws, the universal truth of impermanence. So you can see that here, that there's just no way to obtain these things to be permanent because they're all conditioned, they're all impermanent. All right, any questions on this one? Okay, so we're going to move on. Marcy, this is essentially the same thing, just being repeated over, and kind of the Buddha's elaborating on it in different ways. But that was the core of that particular discourse. So I put all of this in here because it's helpful to read it all, the words of the Buddha. But in terms of our study group, I'm just going to focus on the core teaching for a discourse like that because of the amount of time that we have. So is there anyone who would like to read chapter 54? Okay, go ahead, Tonka.
4 things wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Householder, there are these 4 things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. What 4? 1 things. May wealth come to my righteously. This is the first thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously, 1 things. May fame come to me and to my relatives and preceptors. This is the second thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously and having gained fame for oneself and for one's relatives and preceptors, 1 things. May I live long and enjoy a long lifespan. This is the third thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously, having gained fame for oneself and for one's relatives and preceptors, living long and enjoying a long lifespan, 1 things. With the breakup of the body after death, may I be reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. This is the 4th thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. These are the 4 things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. There are householders, 4 other things that lead to obtaining those 4 things. What 4? Accomplishment in confidence, accomplishment in virtuous behavior, accomplishment in generosity, and accomplishment in wisdom. And what householder is accomplishment in confidence? Here a noble disciple is endowed with confidence. He places confidence in the enlightenment of the Tathagata, thus the perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate knower of the world, unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the perfectly enlightened one. This is called accomplishment in confidence. And what is accomplishment in virtuous behavior? Here a noble disciple abstains from the destruction of life, abstains from taking what is not given, abstains from sexual misconduct, abstains from false speech, abstains from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. This is called accomplishment in virtuous behavior. And what is accomplishment in generosity? Here, a noble disciple resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in relinquishment, devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment in generosity. And what is accomplishment in wisdom? If one dwells with a mind overcome by longing and unrighteous sensual desires, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duties so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by ill will, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by complacency, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by restlessness and worry, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by doubt, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there, Tonka, because this is the core of the discourse. There's some more there, but since we have so many chapters this week, I would like to just talk about these. So here, this first part, the Buddha is talking about 4 things that people really desire. They really want. They want wealth, they want fame, they want to live a really long life, and potentially people may be interested to be reborn in heaven, right? And this isn't what I would necessarily recommend for you, but the Buddha is just making it obvious known here as like, hey, these are the 4 things that people really want in the world. And he's saying, okay, well, if you really want those things, the way to actually accomplish them is through these 4 things, is having confidence in him, in his teachings, having virtuous moral behavior or moral conduct, practicing generosity, and cultivating wisdom. This is the way that would lead to these types of things. And not that the Buddha is encouraging you to want wealth and fame and to live long and to be reborn in heaven, but he's just saying, hey, this is the way to do it if you're planning to acquire these things, but you would like to work through developing your confidence by learning and practicing the teachings, by learning the virtuous behavior and practicing that, the generosity and the wisdom. And ultimately, when he talks about cultivating wisdom, he talks about the 5 hindrances. Here, this longing and unrighteous sensual desires, this is the sensual desire, one of the 5 hindrances. And then the ill will, the anger, the hostility, the bitterness, the aggression. Then the complacency is like the lack of enthusiasm, the motivation, the lack of ambition and dedication and determination. Restlessness and worry, we might refer to this as like anxiety, where the mind is restless and overactive and worried about things. And then doubt is to have doubt about the teachings, to have doubt about the Buddha and whether or not they'll lead you to enlightenment. And people usually have doubt when they first come to the path to enlightenment. And then as you learn more and more and you investigate the teachings and reflect them and you see them working in your life, you eliminate your doubts. You won't be enlightened yet, but you'll have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind. So the Buddha goes on in the discourse explaining that once you understand that these 5 hindrances are hindering you from getting to enlightenment, that you abandon them. And that's what his teachings are helping you to learn how to do, is how to abandon these through training the mind. And then having abandoned them, then your mind can make its way to enlightenment. And that's what he's basically saying here, that you can accomplish this wisdom by eliminating the 5 hindrances. So let me know if you guys have questions here on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 55. Let's see, I'm going to summarize this one for you guys so we can move on, since we have 14 chapters this week. What the Buddha is describing here is that if you're wanting to be reborn somewhere in a particular place, the Buddha is saying, okay, practice the teachings in order to acquire that particular rebirth, that you can't just be reborn in this place by happenstance, but if you're interested in truly being reborn in an improved destination to learn and practice the teachings. That's what he's basically teaching here. But of course, his words are going to go into a lot of detail about all of that, which you guys are welcome to read and understand and ask questions at any time. This one here, chapter 56, he's talking about this ruler of the heavenly beings named Saka. He's saying, okay, who does Saka actually worship, this ruler of the heavenly beings? And then by the time you get down here, the Buddha's saying, okay, Saka essentially worships, I think he's saying someone with moral conduct and essentially someone who's getting close to enlightenment is what he's basically saying here. I worship as well, O Mata, those household practitioners making merit, household practitioners possessed by virtue who righteously maintain a wife, right? So people who are practicing moral conduct. This entity of Saka of the heavenly beings is in awe or admiring people who practice moral conduct. Let's see the next one here. If we can read this one, chapter 57. Is there someone who would like to volunteer for this one? You guys can go ahead. Sure, Tonka.
Truly favorable and optimistic. Monks, those beings who engage in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind, in the morning have a good morning. Those beings who engage in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind, in the afternoon have a good afternoon. And those beings who engage in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind, in the evening have a good evening. Truly favorable and optimistic, a peaceful daybreak and joyful rising, a peaceful moment and cheerful hour will come for those who offer alms, a donation to those leading the spiritual life.
Okay, I think this is a very straightforward discourse, as many of them are once you learn the teachings of the Buddha, but this one's very straightforward. He's basically saying, okay, if you practice wholesome moral conduct, bodily, speech, and mental conduct, you're going to have a good morning because you're practicing the teachings very closely and you're not causing harm to others, so no harm's coming back to you. And the same thing in the afternoon and the evening as well. So you can experience this peace and joy in the world through improving the decisions that you make about your moral conduct. This is essentially what he's sharing. So let me know if you guys have questions here. Okay, it looks like Tonka has a question. Go ahead.
Teacher David, I was noticing that sometimes, for example, nothing is happening in my environment. And I start feeling some discontentedness. And then the only reason that I can find for that arising is thinking. So the mind, some thinking causes that discomfort in the body. So I was wondering how beneficial is it to pay attention and try to figure out exactly what kind of thoughts I had in my mind that caused that discomfort in the body, or should I just simply cut it off and let it go as soon as I notice? What I'm saying, is there a benefit into going into detail? Okay, where was my mind? What was I thinking? Why this sensation in my body came into the being, or simply just cut it off?
Okay, so first off, what's causing any kind of displeasure or discomfort is always craving, desire, attachment. Always, always, always. And in that thought that you're having, there must be some craving that is arising. So just be sure you understand that it's the craving, the longing, the yearning, and it's within that thought that you're having. So in the moment when this is occurring, you'd like to cut it off and let it go. Just cut it off and let it go. Don't think twice about it. Just respond right away with a cutting off. Then after the mind's calm, that's when you look inward and you start reflecting. What was I thinking about? Oh, I'm craving this thing from the past, or oh, I'm craving this thing in the future. That's where you would like to look at whatever craving, desire, attachment is. But in the moment when the discomfort is arising, cut it off and cut it off and cut it off. That's what you'd like to do. And it might take redirecting the mind to go outside, go do something. It might be several hours or a couple of days before you can look at that situation and see what was the craving, desire, attachment. But there's definitely a lot of benefit to looking at that, because then when you uncover what the cravings are, then you can take action to remove them through the way that I teach about putting the mind in the situation that it is having craving, desire, attachment in, so that way, as this discontent is arising and the craving gets triggered, you can cut it off, and this will restrain the mind and more get rid of the craving, desire, attachment.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing questions anywhere else. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 58. So I guess if no one volunteers, I'll go ahead and read it. Okay, so chapter 58 is titled Right and Wrong Refuge. They go to many a refuge, to mountains and forests, to parks and tree shrines, people threatened with danger. That's not the secure refuge, not the supreme refuge. That's not the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. But when having gone to the Buddha, the teachings, in the community for refuge, you see with right wisdom the Four Noble Truths, stress, the cause of stress, the transcending of stress, the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the stilling of stress. That's the secure refuge, that, the supreme refuge, that is the refuge, having gone to which you gain release from all discontentedness and stress. So sometimes what the Buddha is describing during his lifetime and even now, somebody might have a mountain home, right? They live in a certain city, maybe 2 hours away. They drive to the mountains and they think like, this is where I can finally relax. I can be protected. I can have this refuge. I can be secure. I can let everything go and I'll solve my stress. But this isn't the actual refuge or the protection that's going to lead to the complete elimination of your stress and your discontentedness. It's a temporary thing. And even when you're there, your mind is following you. So any kind of fear that you might have or feeling threatened, it's not an escape by just going to, say, a mountain cabin or something like this. While those things are enjoyable and you might decide to go do those things sometimes, it's not going to be the permanent protection that you're going to receive through going to the Buddha, the teachings, the community for refuge, meaning learning and practicing the teachings and training your mind. Through learning and practicing the teachings, train your mind, understanding with right wisdom the Four Noble Truths, which is going to explain to you the problem, which is discontentedness, the cause of that problem, which is craving, desire, attachment, the elimination of the problem, which is eliminating craving, desire, attachment, and the path forward to completely eliminate discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. That's the secure refuge. That's what's going to actually eliminate the discontent feelings. But this tree shrine, this cabin, the forest, that's not going to eliminate the stress 100%. So as you go on holiday and you think that you're de-stressing from work or something like that, great, go on holiday, go on vacation. But if you're integrating in the teachings of the Buddha throughout your year, then you won't actually be experiencing that significant stress. You can get to the point where you eliminate it 100%. And that would be the actual way to eliminate your stress, not the temporary pleasures that we might encounter on a holiday or something like that. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 58. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now let's go to chapter 59. There's a whole bunch here actually that are essentially very similar. This is a student asking the Buddha how to practice a certain holiday. And this person has already been practicing the holiday in the way that it was being done prior to the Buddha. But now that the Buddha is sharing his teachings, people are saying, hey, what would be an ideal way for us to practice this particular holiday through your teachings? And then the Buddha gives some guidance on this in terms of how to practice the moral conduct that he teaches. Because oftentimes what people are doing during holidays is rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And that's what they were doing prior to the Buddha. But the Buddha is teaching, hey, if you really would like to celebrate this holiday, then improve your practice around moral conduct. And he gives all this guidance about practice of moral conduct. And he does that here in this discourse. And he's talking about a lot of the precepts. He does that here in this particular discourse, talking about the Eightfold Path and ultimately the Tenfold Path. Then the next one here, he's again essentially saying the same thing, but giving other details of like how to improve your moral conduct around various things. These are very helpful for you to learn, not because you're necessarily interested in celebrating the holiday this way, but what he's guiding you to is how to get to enlightenment. So notice here where he says, the person abandons argumentative speech. So you're not just interested in eliminating arguments during holidays, you're interested in doing that all the time. An enlightened being is not going to be arguing with anybody whatsoever. So here it's helpful to read all of these discourses so you can learn about the moral conduct that the Buddha is teaching. And then here's another one, chapter 62, where the Buddha is talking about the same thing, but now he's referencing the tenfold path. While we're here, we don't see the tenfold path coming up very frequently. So here you see that he's talking about wrong concentration, and then he's talking about wrong wisdom and wrong liberation. So prior to this, he was talking about right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. But remember, an enlightened being is practicing the tenfold path. It's the eightfold path that is going to guide you to the enlightened mental state. But once you're enlightened, you're actually going to be practicing the tenfold path. The difference is that the eightfold path is providing you tangible guidance of how to train your mind and move the mind towards enlightenment, extinguishing all your unwholesome karma, training the mind through wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline, moving to the higher mind or the higher consciousness. And then having done so, you will then be practicing right wisdom and right liberation. There isn't any guidance around this in terms of like where the Buddha teaches like right speech. He talks about eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. Well, if you've cultivated all the wisdom of the path to enlightenment and you've attained final knowledge where you fully understand the path to enlightenment, you will be practicing right wisdom. That's why he doesn't have to explain exactly what it is, because it will be the right wisdom that led to then the 10th factor of the tenfold path, which is practicing right liberation. Here he's referring to the opposite, but right liberation is where the mind no longer experiences discontentedness anymore. So if you fully cultivated all the wisdom of the Eightfold Path, you fully implemented it, fully eliminated all the 10 fetters, you now have right wisdom, and you're now experiencing right liberation, which is your mind is actually liberated, no longer experiencing any discontentedness. So this is the tenfold path that the Buddha is referencing. And he does that occasionally, and this is something that an enlightened being would already be practicing, because there's not any specific teachings around right wisdom or right liberation, because these are the results of having practiced the Eightfold Path to perfection, and now the mind is fully transformed. So let me know if you guys have any questions on any of this. Looks like Tonka has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Teacher David, I was wondering if you see any values in celebrating any holidays.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I was wondering if you see any values in celebrating any particular holidays. And if I remember correctly, you mentioned that you don't pay too much attention to birthdays and stuff like that.
Yeah, someone asked this question recently in the Facebook group about, how do we celebrate these holidays that are coming up where they're celebrating the life of the Buddha. He was born, that he got to enlightenment, and his death. And they were asking me, how do you celebrate a holiday? Kind of like what these students were asking the Buddha during his lifetime. Their students now asking me, like, how to celebrate a holiday. And my response to them was to learn, reflect, and practice the teachings, because the Buddha talks about this is the best way to respect him. In fact, this is what the student was asking, like, how can we respect the Buddha on important Buddhist holidays? And I said, learn and practice his teachings, because that's what the Buddha taught is the best way to respect him is to learn and practice his teachings. But as it relates to certain holidays, I just look at it as another day. It's another rotation around the sun. The moon's going around, the sun's going around. Not in a pessimistic way. I don't think of it that way. Our family around New Year's, we usually go out together and go have some food somewhere and spend a little bit of time doing some outing. Or if it's mom's birthday or my birthday or my son's birthday, we might go out as a family together. But it's not like this hoopla celebration. It's just like, okay, well, let's just acknowledge something. Like my son's getting ready to graduate elementary school, and they're going to have a little graduation. We'll probably take him out to some food because we're already going to eat anyway, but we might just go to a little bit nicer restaurant than typical, or maybe we'll let my son pick a certain food that he would like to go eat or something like this. So it's not like a hoopla celebration like maybe we would do in the past with alcohol or dancing and all these kinds of stuff. If somebody chooses to go out and do those things, that's their choice. I wouldn't suggest anybody who's on the path to enlightenment to involve alcohol, but there's no harm in actually doing dancing. But oftentimes when dancing is going on, there's alcohol and drugs around, so you need to be aware of that, find a wholesome environment. In those places do exist where you can go do some wholesome dancing where there isn't alcohol and drugs and stuff like this. But yeah, I don't celebrate any particular holiday. I see all days as the same. I treat them all equally with equanimity and fairness rather than celebrating one day versus another.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I actually forgot that there was those 4 chapters that we could have just went right through. So I was kind of moving through the class, but now we only have 2 more chapters and we're done for today's study group. So if somebody would like to read this chapter, this is titled Responsibilities of a Teacher, or I can read it if you guys like. Sure, go ahead, Tonka.
The responsibilities of a teacher. Monks, when a cattle worker possesses 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. What 11? Here a cattle worker has wisdom of 4. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes flies, eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the shed. He knows the watering place. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not milk dry, and he shows extra veneration to those bulls who are fathers and leaders of the herd. When a cattle worker possesses these 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. So too monks, when a monk possesses these 11 qualities, he is capable of growth, increase, and maturity in the teachings of discipline. What 11? Here a monk has wisdom of 4. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes flies, eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the sheds. He knows the watering place. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not milk dry, and he shows extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers of leaders of the community. And how is a monk skilled in characteristics? Here a monk understands as it really is thus. An unwise person is characterized by his actions. A wise person is characterized by his actions. It is in this way that a monk is skilled in characteristics. And how does a monk smoke out the sheds? Here a monk teaches the teachings to others in detail as he has heard it and learned it. It is in this way that monk smokes out the sheds. And how does a monk know the watering place? Here, from time to time, a monk approaches those monks who are learned, heirs to the heritage, experts on the teachings, experts on the discipline, experts on the outlines, and inquires of them. How is this, venerable sir? What is the meaning of this? Those venerable ones then disclose to him what has not been disclosed, clear up what is obscure, and dispel his perplexity about numerous perplexing points. It is in this way that monk knows the watering place. And how does monk know what it is to have drunk? Here, when the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, a monk gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the teachings, gains joy connected with the teachings. In this way that monk knows what it is to have drunk. And how does monk know the road? Here a monk understands the Noble Eightfold Path as it really is. It is in this way that monk knows the road. And how is a monk skilled in pastures? Here a monk understands the 4 foundations of mindfulness as they really are. It is in this way that a monk skilled in pastures. And how does a monk not milk dry? Here, when dedicated household practitioners invite a monk to take robes, alms food, lodging, and medicines, and provisions for the sick, a monk is moderate in accepting donations. It is in this way that a monk does not milk dry. And how does a monk show extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have a long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community? Here a monk maintains bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both openly and privately, toward those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. It is in this way that monk shows extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. Possessing these 11 qualities, a monk is capable of growth, progress, and fulfillment in these teachings and discipline. Here only 8 of the 11 factors are shared, as these 8 apply to generosity and gratitude. So see the included reference for the entire teaching.
Okay, thank you, Tonka. So here, this particular book, Volume 12, is really geared towards ordained practitioners and people who are planning to teach the teachings. But there's lots of teachings in here, even for a household practitioner, that would be helpful for you. But here, the Buddha is connecting what people would have understood during this time, which is a cattle worker. There's plenty of farmers during his lifetime, so they would have understood all the skills that that person needs in order to be a good cattle worker. And he's connecting it to being a good teacher and a good monk and what the responsibilities are in that role. Because people that were ordaining with him were from all walks of life, but people would have known about cattle herding during his lifetime pretty well. And these are some of the skills that an individual would need to be a good cattle worker. And now he's correlating that to sharing the teachings and being a responsible teacher. And he's giving all the different characteristics that you would need as a teacher. And I aspire to be practicing all of these things, and perhaps you see me practicing these things and sharing these things in terms of the way that I conduct my life. But if you're ever interested in being a teacher, this is a teaching that would be very helpful for you. One that I'd like to point out here for anybody who's interested in teaching, because this is oftentimes something that is looked at, is that the Buddha uses this term milk dry, where oftentimes students are making donations to teachers, and depending on their level of development on the path, if they have a lot of craving to practice generosity, they might overextend themselves and not realize it, because as a student who's unenlightened, they're not necessarily making 100% wise decisions. And as a teacher, it's our responsibility that as a student's making offerings, that we ensure that they're not overextending themselves. And this is something that the student's responsible for. But if the teacher knows their students very well, then they would be able to maybe ask their students. So like I've had this occur just recently where some students have been making some pretty substantial offerings, like, upwards of $500. And I know these students, this particular student, and I know their situation financially and where they're at medically. And I made sure I checked in with the student. And because I have a relationship with the student's wife, I also checked in with the student's wife to be sure that they were comfortable with that type of donation, because a student could be potentially donating something out of craving, desire, attachment. And the Buddha is using this term milk dry, like as if you were milking a cow and you dried up all the milk, that would be hard for that cow to produce more milk. So the same thing is true, that when you're receiving donations from students, you would like to be sure you're not drying up their wealth and that they're not depleting their resources, because how could they ever get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if they don't have the resources to meet their basic necessities? So as a individual is accepting donations, be sure that the Buddha's guidance here of accepting donations in moderation. This is that you're aware of what your students are offering you. I've had the same situation where I knew of a student who was making an offering to me, and their wife had recently lost their job and was fired. And I needed to check in and say, hey, is this really a good time for you to be making an offering? Is this something that you've thought through? So I never decline an offering necessarily, but just kind of checking in with them and seeing that they've thought through their donation before they've actually donated it and I actually receive it. So this is something to keep in mind. So if you guys have any questions on any of these, you're welcome to ask. I just thought I would kind of highlight that one for anybody who's interested in being a teacher, because it's something that you'll see occasionally where people maybe are overextending themselves, and you need to be aware of those kinds of things. So Marcy, go ahead. Do you have a question, or is that to read the next chapter?
Both, Teacher David. So I just want to make sure that it sounds as though I practice good discernment. I was making a substantial amount of money and I was doing a monthly donation, and then I had to pull back on that monthly donation because of my finances. So how would that affect like my merits and generosity? Do you know what I mean? Like I am interested in continuing to make donations, but I find myself right now financially with less hours, so the money is not there. So I continue generosity in other aspects, but I'm not able to provide that financial monthly that I was doing. Am I practicing good discernment for this being?
Yeah, remember that practicing generosity and producing merit, it's time, effort, energy, and resources. So teachers shouldn't have any expectation of anything from their students, and the student's going to have to observe the middle way, that even though they may have been donating to a certain degree in the past, as things shift and change in their life due to impermanence, they're going to have to shift and change their generosity, where certain periods you might be able to be more generous in terms of sharing and you have more resources to share. And then other times you might have to draw that back in and really focus on your own needs as well. And this is what the Buddha taught. So, and this is what I teach as well. So if that's what you're doing, which it sounds like you are, then you're paying attention to your own needs, because those need to be met first. We're about to move into next week, volume 13, which is all about generosity. And there you'll see that the Buddha teaches to make sure you're whole first before you ever make an offering to a teacher that is sharing these teachings. So what you're doing sounds exactly what I would advise you to do.
Thank you, Teacher David.
You're welcome. Let me take a look around and see if we have any questions anywhere else. And I don't see any questions anywhere else. So let's go to the last chapter for today. Here you can see all the explanation and reflections that I'm providing. And then there's this last one here. This is chapter 64.
Who should you not teach, and who should you teach? Monks, someone with 6 features is unable to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities, even when listening to true teachings. What 6? When the teachings and practice proclaimed by the perfectly enlightened one is being taught, they are not interested to listen. They do not actively listen. They do not apply effort to understand. They learn the incorrect meaning. They ignore the correct meaning. They adopt views and contradict the teachings. Someone with these 6 features is unable to enter the sure path with regards to skillful qualities, even when listening to the true teachings. Someone with 6 qualities is able to enter the sure path with regards to the skillful qualities when listening to the true teachings. What 6? When the teachings and practice proclaimed by the perfectly enlightened one are being taught, they are interested in to listen. They actively listen. They apply effort to understand. They learn the correct meaning. They ignore the incorrect meaning. They adopt views that match the teachings. Someone with these 6 qualities is able to enter the sure path with regards to the skillful qualities when listening to the true teachings.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, this is also guidance for a teacher, because you might think that a teacher just teaches everybody and anybody. Well, we're receiving of anybody and anybody. We're willing to teach anybody with a sincere interest in learning and practicing the teachings. But an individual who's going to be a student and progress in the path to enlightenment, they need to have a sincere interest to learning and practicing. There's 1,000,001 decisions that you're going to need to make in order to get to enlightenment. And if the individual isn't even willing to make the first decision to listen to the teachings with interest, to actively listen, to apply their effort to understand, to learn the correct meaning, to ignore any incorrect meaning, and if they are able to adopt views that are in line with the teachings, this individual is going to be able to learn and grow and develop. So the Buddha is providing guidance here of these are people who would be unwise to teach. Essentially, the ego's up. They're not interested in hearing anything from you about teachings. So the Buddha is saying, hey, don't even waste your time, essentially, is what he's saying. He doesn't say that directly, but it really would be a waste of your time to try to share teachings with someone who's not interested to listen, who does not actively listen, who does not apply effort to understand, who learns the incorrect meaning, who ignores the correct meaning and adopts views that are contrary to the teachings. But on the other side, if there is a student who is interested in listening, that they actively listen, that they apply effort to understand, they learn the correct meaning, they ignore the incorrect meaning, and they adopt views that match with the teachings, this individual is truly on the path to enlightenment. They're learning the true teachings and they're making decisions to actively progress forward towards enlightenment. And this would be the ideal student to be able to learn and grow and develop. And as long as the individual has determination, dedication, and diligence, there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to progress towards enlightenment as part of their journey in this particular life. So this is really helpful because sometimes people might think that, oh, as a teacher, you should go out there and teach everybody. But a teacher can't teach everybody because that would be permanence if they were. So instead, a teacher is just making themselves available. They're not interested in convincing people or forcing people to learn or do anything, but instead anybody who has a sincere interest to learn and practice, and they're willing to practice with these 6 qualities that the Buddha is teaching, then this would make the very best student to be able to then learn and grow and develop on the path. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular teaching. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So next week, we're going to be in volume 13, which is titled Generosity, and we're going to be working our way through that over the next 2 months. We're going to be restarting the Pali Canon and English Study Group from the very beginning towards the middle of July. And you don't have to start in the middle or at the beginning in order to begin this program because it's a 1.5-year program. But now that we are restarting it, this is an ideal time for people to restart it. But people can start the Pali Canon English Study Group at any point. And next week, we're going to be in the very last volume of the book series. Now that I've been teaching the entire book series for a 1.5 years, we're going to be starting with chapters 1 through 10. So you can download this from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here at the temple, or you can order it on Amazon. So that book is volume 13, titled Generosity. Tomorrow in the group learning program, I'm going to be teaching the 4 Noble Truths, which the 3 Universal Truths are part of that. So if you'd like to learn that, you have that option available to you at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Thai time. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be teaching the first part of a 4-part series on Buddhist chanting. So if you're interested in learning Buddhist chanting, this would be the opportunity for you to be able to do that. So as you have questions, feel free to reach out in all the different ways by posting in our Facebook group, by asking questions in classes, by sending private messages, or scheduling personal guidance. And perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.